if the consumer is buying a $15,000 kitchen, my question to the industry is your product really going to be that much better than a standard size offering? And that's something that I genuinely want people to think about. So welcome to episode 9 of Site to Studio. It's a podcast where we talk to construction industry individuals about cool things industry related and to learn about their journeys and their stories.
Great. Thanks for having me, Charley.
Headed. So today's guest is Steve. And what really intrigued me about what Steve is doing is I think it's really going to shake up, or it certainly has the potential to really shake up the cabinet making industry in Australia. And obviously that's something that holds close to me because I run a cabinet making business. So I really wanted to have you on to learn about what you guys are doing and how, what's the macro vision of what you're trying to create? How is that going to tie into the industry? What that means for the consumer, for the industry participants, and for you guys as a company.
Great. Let's talk. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So let's start off by just could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and
Sure. So mid-40s, I've been working for Laminex for 5.5 years now. My background is actually corporate finance. So left Sydney in my mid-20s to go travel the country and see the sites, landed in Perth and worked for a company called iiNet, internet service provider based out of Perth. My role there was corporate planner, and that meant basically working on their big projects and leading a team that ran acquisitions, that business. They were going through aggregation, and my role was to lead those. So 36 different ISP buyers later and a few divestments on the way through. That was really what I specialised in for a while. A little bit homesick, and my wife wanted to go back to uni, so I went back to Sydney, where I grew up. And my wife is from Melbourne, so I stayed there for a few years while she finished her uni degree, and then back to Melbourne when we had kids. So moved down to Melbourne. I worked a couple of jobs, but mostly here at iiNet, here at Laminex, and my role is part of the senior leadership team. I came in as the head of transformation. So really a change management role and fixing the big issues within the business, which is a never-ending journey, focusing on improving their contact centre, focusing on improving their supply chain and how we deliver for customers, delivering a digital e-commerce platform that's gone live over the last 2 years, and now focusing on this project, which is a new business we've started called Haven Kitchens by Formica.
Right. So I want to give you my understanding of what Haven Kitchens is, and then you'll tell me where I'm right or where I'm wrong.
Sure.
So the problem in the industry is, feel free, don't worry about the noise or anything. It's not that serious. So the problem in the industry is there's many small operators in terms of cabinet makers doing largely the same thing, creating a largely homogenous product rather inefficiently. And Haven Kitchens can centralize a lot of the production components of that production process and do it more efficiently than the market at large, package that into a product for those cabinet makers who would otherwise be producing for themselves, a product that's desirable to the consumer, and make a certain part of the industry more efficient.
In probably one way of looking at really the problem, if you kind of stand back from it, is really an industry-wide problem, not necessarily with how cabinet makers work, but more for the threats that exist for that trade. And as the Laminex business sees it, cabinet makers are our heart and soul. That's what the Laminex business really relies on for its success. It's Australian manufacturing. It's very focused on supporting Australian jobs and the trade and supplying into those trades. What we've been seeing, well before my time starting with Laminex over the last 15 years, is disruption. And so we've seen that a few times now, the disruption to the post-forming business through the change from high pressure laminate to engineered stone bench tops. That's one that's really felt closely by Laminex. The disruption to the furniture making industry that really doesn't exist in Australia in its form that it did 10, 15 years ago, that's all gone offshore. Now, there's some amazing furniture makers here in Australia, but it's nothing like it was 15 years ago. We see a similar level of disruption, maybe a little slower, but the same type of disruption happening within the cabinet making trade. And that's driven by a couple of things. Firstly, it's an expensive trade to be in. It's a tough trade on your body, given the equipment that you need and the level of startup. It's a risk. It's a trade that has probably not attracted as many into it that have been retiring. But the big disruption has really been the change in the way the market is demanding product. And so there's still the premium end product. There's still a nice heart of market for good quality kitchens. But what we've seen is the emergence of flat pack, faster model, low cost produced product that's been growing over time. It's probably 20% market share today. If you look globally, Australia today is probably where somewhere like the UK was 20 years ago. And it was a very similar structure. And today there is really no disaggregated large cabinet maker industry in the UK at all. And so if you accept that change is growing and creeping over time, then you'd say that the Australian cabinet maker industry is under threat and we need to respond to that.
Right.
So our thinking is there is really no large industry body that represents the cabinet makers. To band together those 9,000 cabinet maker businesses to go and fight the fight that needs to be fought to really survive as an industry is going to be difficult. Somebody needs to take the front, and we've made that choice to do that.
Right. I think one interesting way of looking at Haven and how it fits into the market would be sort of who are the key stakeholders and what value it presents to each one of those. I see sort of the key stakeholders as being Laminex as a company, as a business, the consumer, and the cabinet maker. Would there be anyone else really involved in that process?
No, I think that pretty much nails it. The supply, and it's not just Laminex. There's we've recognised that there's many different suppliers that support the Australian cabinet making industry.
Sure.
The Blooms, the Hedicks,
but just Haven Kitchens as a venture in itself.
Yep.
And so if you don't mind, I'd like to start with the consumer because I think it all starts with the consumer because that's who drives the demand. Do you see where do you see the demand, or what's the value proposition to the consumer for what I presume Haven's trying to produce is a well-priced, not custom, so within select ranges like kitchens, robes, cabinet making products. What's that value proposition for the consumer?
Sure, there's a few. And maybe if I just step back to what the Haven model is.
Sure, perfect.
To then how that plays out for the consumer and then for the trade and then for others as well. So the Haven model it's a trade only. So the model, we'd only sell to trades, but we do interact with the homeowner by providing a 3D CAD visualization design service. It's an in-stock model, and it's a curated bespoke or curated type range that we offer. And the reason we've done those things is to solve some problems for each of those stakeholders that you've just mentioned. One of the issues that we hear from the consumers and from the trade is that there's a challenge with speed. So there's the block type TV shows, those kind of things that have set an expectation for the homeowner, and then there's just constraint within the market, particularly going into Christmas time. So what we hear consistently, if you want a kitchen for Christmas time, it's now September, and really the reality of being able to walk in the door and get your kitchen done before Christmas is diminishing every day. So what we hear from our customers, the trade, the cabinet makers, is that they're turning a lot of jobs away because that confluence of I can see it getting done really quickly on TV shows versus I'm actually being told to wait 3, 4, 5 months for something I really want it for Christmas. They're turning away disappointed.
So faster lead times for the client.
Yep.
For the consumer. That's a big
That's the
thing.
nub of it.
Yeah.
The other thing that we can offer is really if you think of growing an industry as well, now this is some way down the track, but one that we really see some potential in. The average kitchen life is 12 years, 12 and a half years, I think, is the average kitchen life in Australia. The ability to have a standard sized offer into the market allows us to help our trade customers basically build that market further. They can go back and revisit that home after 8-9 years, even faster, and do a refit of that relatively easily, and then basically grow the whole size of the pie.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding that correctly. So how does your product affect the life cycle cost of a kitchen and how a tradesman gets back into a home quicker?
So maybe it's an emotional type discussion.
Yeah.
What we know as the Laminex business, we sell a lot of decorated board, and that's what the Laminex business stands for. We have factories around the country that focus on doing that. What the majority of kitchens that sell into the market are white and grey. And that choice is really driven by concern of risk of what if I get it wrong? I think that's my hypothesis. Or I'm doing this for sale, so I want to make the kitchen as neutral as possible so someone can bring their own colour to it. Or I just don't know if it's going to live through a colour cycle. 3 or 4 years' time, I'll be sick of this colour and I've had enough. The ability to sell a kitchen to the homeowner, firstly, the design service with CAD visualization makes the homeowner a lot more comfortable, or helps them really see what the end product's going to look like. I'm hoping it also lets them to be a little bit more adventurous, that I can take some risk and have a kitchen that I really love. But the downside risk of getting that wrong is minimal for a couple of reasons. Firstly, by an in-stock model, we can get the product into the home, where our trade customers can bring the product into the home, see it in space, and if they hate it, no problems, package it back up, bring it back. The second challenge is also, or that we think this model helps solve, is that 6-7 years' time, when they do get sick of it, just refacing the kitchen, so basically I take the door fronts off and re-click on the new ones, is a lot easier in this model, rather than I have to go get that remeasured, start again, to be able to turn my kitchen over and get a new look.
Right. And I think if we just give people who might not be in the industry some context, if you're going to measure in alterations and additions like a kitchen reface, that might end up being 70% of the cost of just redoing the whole kitchen, because it's such an inefficient process of measuring every door, just to reface, measuring all the hinge locations, especially when we're so used to just drawing a parametric cabinet in a Cabinet Vision, CABmaster, whatever software you use, and it just drills everything and cuts everything for you.
Yeah.
So it's highly inefficient. And what you're saying is, because it's an in-stock standard size model, that there will be components that you can easily swap out.
Exactly. And we're not doing that for us. We are. But really what we do is then go back to the original trade that we purchased that, and basically create a database for them to say, hey, this kitchen's now at year 6, year 7. What we're finding is a lot of those customers are wanting to rethink, but the cost of that's prohibitive, so they normally wait to year 12. Why don't you go back and have a conversation and see if there's something they want to upgrade?
Right.
Or they've had their first home and they came in as a cut and edge door. They're now probably ready to upgrade to a vinyl or a foil or a paint, and that's something that's relatively easy to do.
Right. So for the consumer, number one is lead time. You can get it done quicker.
Exactly.
Number two is more flexibility in the design. You can give them more confidence with 3D design. That's more homogenous. I think everyone's doing 3D designs. But the depth of the product SKU allows the consumer to also swap out components very easily. The idea of delivering a kitchen and packaging it up and sending it back, that's interesting as well.
Yeah, and there's probably a fourth point as well, which I missed on the way through, which is if there's damage to any part of your kitchen in the first however long that you've got it. So we all know the challenges with products like paint, that they can scratch or they can chip. If you have any of those challenges, now they're obviously covered by warranty. You typically get 7 years, but at 8 years, what do you do? Either you need to go replace the whole kitchen, or what you can do with this model is it's 1 or 2 doors, you take them off, they're easily replaced.
Right. Okay, so that's for the consumer. So it's I think I also see for the consumer, it's kind of like why a lot of people in the industry don't like volume builders like Metricon and whatnot. But I'm very open to recommending people build with Metricon, because it's such a confidence-inspiring process for the consumer where they don't have to worry about so much. They just go in, pay their money, make their selections, and then they've got a house. It's big, shiny, and relatively void of risk compared to building with a smaller
They're
builder.
very, very good at what they do.
So that's, and I see that as an advantage as well because, there is inherently, for the consumer, it can be better to deal with a bigger company. More often than not, perhaps that's the case.
Yeah. And probably, again, for the consumer, it's a good point you're making there by being backed by a multinational corporate, which is Laminex, backed by the Fletcher Building Group. Our customers, the trade, are really able to inspire that confidence that I don't know you as a cabinet maker. I don't know how long you're going to be around. You look pretty old. You might be retiring at some point. Those kind of thoughts that can go through a homeowner's mind can be taken away really by pointing back to the backing that sits behind the kitchen that they're looking to install.
Right. So for the tradesmen, for the industry folk who would otherwise be building kitchens themselves, what's in it for them? I guess
it's the $1 million question, isn't it? There's a lot in there. What we're hearing, firstly, our motive when you come back to it is to really protect the industry, and we've kicked this around for years and years about the different ways of being able to address this. What we've landed on is this model, and very, very focused on just being for the trade. We'll only sell to the trade. One of our core principles, our core principle, is making the trade's life easier, and everything that we do really revolves around that. So the way we've constructed the model to support the trade is a couple of different things. The design service, the in-stock model is really focused around the concept of time and the way that we can take away a lot of the front-end non-paid work that the trade engage in, so that we can – now often we'd love the trade to come with us for those consults, but if they're too busy, they're doing installs, great. We can take a lot of that initial time investment that they're getting, that they might not even win the job. So if you're winning 50-60% of the jobs you're quoting on, it's down the toilet for the rest, and you're not getting paid for the ones that you do win either for that part of it. Pardon me. So the services that we've built are around helping the trades make more money. And so the way we do that is a couple of different things. The product has been designed and constructed in such a way that should allow for faster install. It's been designed in a way that all of that front-end investment that I mentioned, we can absorb within our business rather than have the small cabinet maker really taking their time in it. And then all of the other features that we've put around that, so credit terms, by being in stock, you can really come into one location rather than having to run to multiple different suppliers. The whole point is that a job that would normally take 3 or 4 days worth of pre-investment, we've done at least 50, 60, 70% of that time work for you.
Right. So the time component is a big one. And I think a lot of cabinet makers don't factor in those costs when they're looking at their gross margins or when they're pricing up jobs, and whilst there certainly is a push or a recognition that cabinet makers spend a lot of time up front for no money and that we should be charging for designs or whatever. I'm speaking more so for the guys working in domestic or retail kitchens, which is the market that you'll be operating in. I think there's certainly recognition that we are spending too much time for no money. So what Haven does is we'll do that legwork for you up front and we'll give you the customer. Is that right? Or so how does that lead
connect? Yeah, it's a great question.
How does the lead generation and the customer journey, how does that work?
Yeah, there's two different journeys that really end with us having a conversation with the customer. Firstly, we'll never provide the price to a homeowner, and we'll never provide a design to the homeowner. We provide those to the trade, and they choose to do with it as they see fit. The customer arrives to us in two different ways. One, they've gone to the cabinet maker, the trade themselves first, and that trade partner has recommended, how about we use a Haven kitchen, or I'll come with you to do and use my designer or a designer that I have, which is our employee, to come and do that check, measure, design, quote exercise.
So just not to go too deep on a single point, but your designers will do a site measure as well?
Yes, they will.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Now, our preference is that the trade's there for that because, but we'll wear the risk of getting that wrong. And the beauty of being in stock also is if we do get it wrong, which will happen from time to time, hasn't yet, but is likely to at some point, by being in stock, we bring the cabinet back, replace it with the one that does fit.
Okay, I'm just going to skip a little bit because I find that point very interesting, because my playing devil's advocate, I thought, well, of course Haven isn't going to manage the on-site stuff at all, because that's the one part that you really can't control, and that's where things go wrong. So what was the thinking behind offering the measure as a service and also taking responsibility for the measure? Yeah,
what we'd love is that the trader ultimately signing off that the final measure is fit for purpose, or it's constructed in such a way that the trade's really comfortable to install that, and ultimately the finished product and how it's installed is the responsibility of the trade.
Okay.
What we take responsibility is that the product is compliant with Australian standards, that it meets the designs that we've offered, and that and then we'll fix any problems that really come up as part of that install that we could reasonably have foreseen on the way as we've done that design.
Right.
So what we're finding to date is that there's a real rush for trades. They don't have the time to do a lot of that work. We're doing it on their behalf. We're providing it. And when they first go to the site, the trades can, and I'm ready to install it, I'll remeasure that just to double check. And then if they find a problem, or we hadn't properly considered, protrusions into the wall or those kind of things, or we've put the tap in the wrong spot, no problems. Get on the phone and we'll fix it.
Right.
Now, I still haven't answered your first question, which was around how does the homeowner come to us?
Yeah, what's that customer journey?
Yeah, so one, they'll come to us with the trade. So what we're finding, and I'll just dig into that one a little bit if I can at the moment.
Please.
What we're finding is that there is trades that have reached capacity, and that they are turning homeowners away because they don't have time to be able to deal with, or that customer doesn't really fit their model. So I'm interested in premium jobs, but I'm getting knocked on the door a lot for guys who are either tie kickers or so they can send those customers to us, and we'll happily engage them on the trade's behalf. And then if that turns into a job, then obviously it comes back to the trade. Or they come to, so what we've built is a showroom type model, not high street. It's more of a selection centre. So the first consult happens within the home with the trade or us individually. We'll do the check measure, we'll do the interview with the homeowner and understand exactly what it is that they want, turn that into the CAD visualisation and a quote that goes back to the trade, who goes and seeks to win the job. Right. The second way the homeowner comes to us is we are a known brand, looking to become a more known brand as well. And so we're doing Facebook marketing, digital marketing, those kind of things. And the purpose of us doing that is to then feed and grow our trade customers' business. So the service we want to offer is not just the fact that we can help you grow your business by doing more kitchens per week. We can also help you grow your business by driving traffic your way.
How does that lead generation and distribution work? Or how do you see it working? I'm sure it'll evolve and change and whatnot, but how do you see that working? So do you have designated areas, or how does that work?
Yeah, so right now we've got 4 trade centre locations. We're southeast Melbourne focused, really. So we're not doing any activity outside of really those regions. So what we're looking to do is help. What we're hearing is there's a real disparity. There's either those trade customers that are so busy, I just can't take any more work on, and that's COVID and the market cycle. It's a fairly healthy market at the moment, but then there's others that aren't enjoying that. So we're looking for those partners as well who have capacity, who we can feed work to and help grow their business.
Right. I think just to help the point of what this means for the cabinet makers sort of hit home, this sort of model has been done and is being done in other countries and in other regions like in Europe and it's become quite a mature model, if not the leading way people were having kitchens built. How does it, could you tell us, let's say a tradesman in the UK, how are they working and how's that different to how we are working here? Like, where do you see the future going?
How does it play out? If we're wrong,
like a case study of how a tradesman works day to day.
And the UK model is a really good one to look at. So if you go back 20 years in Australia, it looked a lot in the UK. It looked a lot like Australia does today. A highly fragmented, multiple different cabinet makers, small, who did bespoke jobs into the home. The Bunnings equivalent over there is a business called B&Q. B&Q had entered the market and grew rapidly and was taking share, similar to what we're seeing happen with the caboodle offer here today, IKEA, similar type offers. Over time, that has transitioned. So the Howdens business is an equivalent type business over there. They've got market share of 30%. And now the rest of the market is made up of Howdens, the IKEA, B&Q offer, and another large business called Wren. So there are still multiple cabinet makers in the market, but nowhere near what there was 20 years ago. That transition has happened fairly rapidly, really driven by the same market dynamics that we're seeing here in Australia. So our concern is that the small cabinet maker that exists today either needs to change to be successful in what that model will look like in 10, 15 years' time, or recognise the fact that there's risk in that strategy. We might be wrong, but if we leave it too long to find out, then we've left it too long.
So just help us understand what the operations of a cabinet maker in the UK and what does that look like compared to a cabinet maker here? Yeah,
so the cabinet makers there are either very large, high speed, automated.
As in the cabinet makers, is in the trades, like the tradesmen who would say 20 years ago have had their own factory. How are they operating now?
So they've formed into one of two different major groups there now. There's still the cabinet maker who does the high end, bespoke, beautiful kitchen that we see in Australia, and probably the equivalent of the $50,000 plus type level. Anything below that level is now an install market rather than a made market. Now there's some, but not many. They're really predominantly coming from those high-speed mega factories that produce standard-sized cabinets into the market. So there's been a transition over time to the cabinet maker is now an installer. They're still a specialist. They have a lot of the same trade skills, so they'll make a cabinet to fit a space, but they're not making the rest of the kitchen.
Right. So that means that without being custom, you also don't need 200mm fillers.
Sorry, one more time.
That means despite not being a custom build, you're not going to have like a 200mm filler.
It's unlikely
because firstly, it's unlikely because of the breadth of the range and the breadth and the depth of the range, but also the cabinet maker. So the cabinet maker's job day to day. So how are they working? So they won't have a factory. They'll just work out of a van. They'll get the kitchens delivered to the client's home after that sale has happened, and they'll build and install the kitchen on site.
That's exactly it. So similar type offer that what Haven's brought into the Australian market. They'll walk into the door. There's a check measure completed by that stage, a design completed, and then basically that turns into a pick list of what the parts are. And then that's delivered to site or picked up by the trade. They're a 95% pickup model in the UK. So the trade has formed around being able to just basically pick up, go to site. It'll be a team of 2 or 3, and they'll look to install a kitchen in a day and a half.
Right. So one particular challenge, and the UK may have been like this 20 years ago, but in Australia, I feel like the consumer loves customizing. The consumer loves, and because everything is so custom, right, in this market. So how does the consumer get over the idea of everything, 85% of it is great, but there's that 15% that I just can't get? And is it going to be a case of, well, if you want that 15%, then you're going to have to pay an extra 30% in terms of the cost delta by going to a custom cabinet maker? Is that going to be the difference, or what's going to be the selling point for them there?
I think there's a couple of things in that. If you look at the Australian market today, there's probably a lot of things that happen under the hood. So if you want a top-end kitchen, well, probably not top-end, but say a Freedom kitchen or a Kinsman type kitchen, those are modular standard size kitchens as well. They're just not sold that way. The difference in our model is that firstly, it's a deep range. So we've got 56 different variations of cabinetry, which we feel and have tested really fits with minimal space loss across the kitchen. There is fillers, but nothing above 200 mil, as you say. And when we do come across that type of feedback, we're constantly iterating the range based on it. So if we're finding that we need a 350 mil cabinet and there's enough demand for that's really causing some challenges for our customers, then we'd look to add it to range.
Right.
What the other thing that the trade and the cabinet makers are skilled at is I can buy, it's pre-assembled, so I don't have the time of constructing a flat pack. It's a rigid carcass construction as well, so glue and dowed, cam and pinned. They can really provide strong confidence to their homeowner of the quality of what that kitchen is. But if they need to make a single cabinet to fit a space, and there's always that, there's always that challenge of, I need to fit a certain size TV, or I've got a unique fridge, or whatever that is. You'd think that we'd be able to solve that. The example I've had a lot of times is, what about a circular kitchen? Now, I've never seen one, but I'm sure they do exist. Does our offer fit that? Probably not. Would it fit some of it? Probably would. So it's really then up to the trade to determine what's the best way to solve that problem. Either use part of ours and make the rest, none of ours and make the whole lot themselves. It's really a problem solved to each unique situation.
Right. And so for the tradesman, the other big thing is the cost of your product versus how much it would cost them to produce a similar product. Are there any general figures on that? Like what sort of, whether it's in terms of what profit margins they would expect to operate under, or what sort of cost basis difference?
Yeah, it's it's probably a tough one to answer depending on what the kitchen is. What we have on offer is a good, better, best position. So we've price positioned it that we feel that we can be really competitive against the entry level new home buyer, or the first home owner who needs to do a quick kitchen and has been watching the block, but I think I've got a budget of 10K, 15K. Then the middle of the market, so our lower offer is melamine door, cutting edge type solution. Then we've got a foil solution in our better, and then paint in our best. How we've positioned this is relative to the cabinet maker. It'll be there or thereabouts, plus or minus a small percentage, depending on what the job is. Will be probably more competitive or less, depending on, it's tough to answer. What we really bring to the value here is speed. So you might make less per job. You might make more, but you might make less on a certain job, but you can do more of them. And what we also think that our offer brings to that trade customer is the ability to make margin on areas that they wouldn't typically. So our offer is cabinetry, frontals, bench tops, sinks, taps, appliances, handles, internal storage, and more coming. So the point of doing that is that where they may have sent the customer off, the homeowner previously off to another place to get their appliances and sinks and taps, our customers can now click the ticket on those things, and they can offer a service where all of that comes at once. So project management's a lot easier, the install's a lot easier. We know it all fits because we've tested it all. We've solved a lot of those problems that mean that you could get in and out of an apartment, for example, within a day and a half. Now, it depends on the job, obviously. And you can do multiple of those a week, where with a bespoke kitchen, that's a lot harder.
Right. My other concern for the trade is that then the trade's offering becomes even more homogenous, because they at the end of the day, they're just a bunch of installers. So that's a little bit of just thinking from a cabinet maker's standpoint. I understand the position that you're coming from is, well, the industry's going that way and we'd like to be part of the solution because that's how the market's trending anyway. But there is that little bit of concern, which is, and I don't want to become overly romantic about the craft or the trade or whatever, which is, where a lot of the negative feedback comes from, I imagine. But is that a concern for the tradesmen if they're unable to differentiate as operators to the extent that they previously could? Does that make any one person's product offering less competitive, or just what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it is a really good question. And I think what we've been talking about is kind of roll forward 20 years. but there's a whole journey between now and then. And what we're finding, the trades that we're talking to really fall into a bunch of different categories depending on where their business cycle's up to, what their mindset is. What we find is you talk to a cabinet maker who is full bottle and turning work away. Those guys see this as an opportunity to keep doing exactly what they've always been doing, but make more money from the leads that they've already generated through the success of their existing business. So we see this as an opportunity for those guys to grow. And by the way, when those customers do turn away, they are not going to another cabinet maker, or some of them are, but really it's lost to the market. They're going and buying a cheaper kind of imported type solution typically, because that's the thing that they control and can get done. There's another group of customers who, trade customers who are doing this job today in a very similar way, that they don't have their own equipment. They haven't built the scale for that to make sense. So really, there's really no difference in what we're offering, apart from the fact that we save them a day a week of constructing that cabinetry, or being able to make an offer that is a really single sourced, so that their life should be a fair bit easier, and we can take some of that front end pain away from them as well. And then there's those customers who really just, or those guys who have finished their trade and looking to go out on themselves. And you hear about this often, that they've gone and bought themselves, a top of the range router. They've made a fairly large investment and haven't really been able to make a go of it, and they've caused themselves some fair problems. What I'm hoping is that this model really helps those guys build some scale before they make that leap. So, build your customer base up, get your credibility into the market that you're getting good word of mouth referral, and then go buy your router, and really, rather than put yourself at any risk beyond that. Australia is the largest, and I think this kind of speaks to that question around where's the market going. Australia is the largest importer of flatbed routers in the world. And
is that per capita or just?
No, that's in total. And the reason for that is because we and New Zealand are really the last markets globally that exist in this form. So again, we might be unique. Over time, that beauty of the trade, beauty of the craft might survive. But global dynamics really make you ask, is that really going to happen? And we don't know. There's a lot of things to play out here, but the risk for getting this wrong is huge for us as a business. We employ 1,300 employees across Laminex. We've got 5 manufacturing sites around the country. If we don't fill our factories, then that knocks on to a whole bunch of other industries as well. So commercial, new home, multi-res, those kind of things that rely on the Laminex business, and Polytech business and other suppliers into Australia. If the cabinet maker trade is under threat, then we're under threat.
Right. So you see Haven as a mechanism for which to decrease the barrier of entry into the market, especially as a business operator, and hopefully, and to build the industry such that there is enough supply in the market to consume your products and meet the market demand as well. So there is that component as well.
I see a way of businesses growing where they currently sit. And it depends. If you've been doing this for 30, 40 years and really reaching the end of the cycle, to go start something new might be too big a leap. And my thinking for those customers, having spoken to plenty of them, is go for your life. Keep doing what you're doing. If you're making a good business, that's great. If you're turning work away and want to grow, then what we are hoping to do is offer an opportunity for that. Or if you're looking to make a $500,000 investment and go to the bank to do that, then what I'd like to offer, just as an alternative, is a way of de-risking that.
Right.
What I mentioned earlier is what I'm really hoping to do is also to grow the market itself. So by having a faster turnover of new homes, of kitchens within the home, as well as providing more confidence and de-risking that for the homeowner. Really the appetite to do your kitchen more often is, I really hope, is there.
Right. So from what you're saying, it's the direction of Haven Kitchens really aligns with the macro trend of where the industry is going, regardless of whether Haven exists or doesn't exist.
If it's not us, it's someone.
Sure.
And what I'm hoping that the Haven business is really able to offer to the trade in Australia is some confidence that we're Australian made. We're here for supporting Australian industry. We make our cabinets in Ballarat. We source our painted doors in Australia. We source our cut and edge doors in Australia. We're really very focused, and that's the heart of the Laminex business is supporting Australian trades, supporting Australian industry, supporting Australian employees. So if it's not us, it's someone. What personally I worry about, and I've met plenty of cabinet makers, and you see them and their kids and their families, and if it's not us, it's someone. Who are they? And if it's an imported model who have different agenda, then it's probably less favourable for our customers.
How would it be? So the market is the market. So how would it be different if an imported model does win in the market? Can we be upset about that?
No, I think market dynamics always win. If you look to the rest of Europe, we've spoken about the UK, but you look to Italy, you look to Germany. These are mega factories that run the kitchen market in those. So the Nobilios of the world, they're producing 30,000 kitchens a week. It's a different market, different demands. But then there is no Laminex in those businesses in those countries anymore. There is no real cabinet maker trade as there in those countries anymore. The market has spoken. The dynamics have worked over time, and it is the mega factories that won.
Right. So they've really eaten everyone.
Yeah.
So there's no one in that. It's fully vertically integrated, except for the installer.
There's an exception. Always. There's the guy who has carved a niche out within it, but they are the exception rather than the rule.
Right. And as a proportion of the total market, it's a insignificant amount.
Yeah, they're much, much smaller. Previously, like Australia, it's 100% cabinet maker. It's not 100% anymore. It's probably 80% of the market now is the bespoke kitchen, maybe less, and that's not increasing. It's decreasing.
Right. So how does your product then differ to like a Caboodle or a Freedom or a Kingsman, and then to the retail kitchen showrooms, right? Like, I don't know. Like I've seen like Mint,
Impala,
Miss and Mr. Kitchens. I've seen. There's
plenty of them.
Like the Kitchen Collect, or like just all those. How does that? I guess they're all sort of products on the spectrum between fully custom and imported trash, without being too, emotive about that. But how do you see all that working?
So I think there's room in the market for a whole, as you say, a spectrum of models. And the market, really the consumer will drive which ones of those get bigger and smaller over time. What we're worried about is the small guy who's putting his kids through school and doing all of those kind of things that if nothing changes, then there's a threat to them. What we see is it's a big market. It's a $6.5 billion market, the kitchen market in Australia. There's players who are high-end bespoke. There's entry-level flat pack and either Australian-made or imported, and there's a whole gamut in between those two things. There's always going to be demand for fully project-managed premium experience where I walk in, I can see my in kitchen, and you're going through a high-end experience, and you pay for it. There's always going to be demand for I can't afford that $60,000, $70,000 experience or more.
So you're talking about polyform data, like that type of.
I'm talking like a high street showroom experience is, and they do a fabulous job. Those guys are really, really good at what they do, and Laminex applies to them. But they play in a segment of the market that's not the whole market. Then there's a segment of the market that,
dare I say, it's a very small part of the market.
It's not the bulk. You're right. Then there's a segment of the market that is landlords or first home buyers that don't have access to a huge amount of capital. They just need something that they can live in. I've just bought a house. This thing is unlivable. I can't work within it. I just need to do something so I can survive for the next 2 or 3 years without eating takeaway every night. So those guys again, have gone to the Caboodles or the IKEAs, and they've found a niche there. And then there's a big chunk in the middle, which is the cabinet maker market, as we've been talking about a lot today. There's a squeeze to that market coming both ways, and you see businesses like the Kitchen Collective you've mentioned. That is that's a Bunnings or a Bunnings owned business. They are looking to roll up and down the East Coast. It's a premium experience, but those guys are serious about what they do. They're very good at what they do, and they're not looking to play a light game. They want to go hard. So if you kind of accept that the dynamics are coming, somebody is going to play hard in this market. We want to play hard in this market too, but do it in a way that favours the trade. What we offer is really a trade solution to an impending problem.
Right. So the market squeeze is coming whether you like it or not. Jump on our ship and it may be a good ride.
That's the message. Again, if it's not going to be for everyone, we've designed an offer that, and the trade's a craftsman. That's not, we've heard constantly, that's not the way I do the back of my cabinet. We use an 18mm cabinet as an example. We edge it all around. We have the back of that, we put a thing in called a service void. The purpose of that was to allow So like a recessed back. It is, yeah. And the purpose of that is that we've focused really on, we think the problem that we've just been speaking about today is really within the renovation market. And the renovation market walls are not typically flush. There's protrusions, there's all of those
How
kind of things.
deep is that recess out of interest?
It's 62mm. And
so if you've got a 580 carcass, you've got a 62 recess.
It's a 580 carcass with a 62 recess, yeah.
And then you cut down the ends as needed.
Yeah. So it's a scribing service. It also allows for, if we did a job a couple of months ago, which had, it was an apartment building, solid walls that had gas pipes running on the outside of the wall. And rather than customize the cabinetry around it, just allowed a notch out for that to happen. What that won't fit is the 90%, which are pretty standard installs. What it will fit is that last 10%. And the purpose of us having that service void in there gives our trade customers real confidence that I'm going to walk into a job and know it's going to fit, rather than it only fits some of the time. And so that's what we've been finding talking to the trades is I hate that bit. That's not the way I do cabinets, and that's fine. If that's the trade's view, then we might not be the offer.
Why? Out of curiosity, is it loss of space or what is it?
It's
because it's much easier to install.
It's different, I think, is probably would be my reflection on it.
So it's why everyone hates the new iPhone or the new
exactly. Yeah. Now it's again, we won't be able to convince everyone of the benefits of that model. We find that once you've used it a couple of times, that actually it really starts to grow on you. But it just won't be for everyone. If it's to go into a new home, I can see some real challenges with that service void. We wouldn't have designed it that way if our target market was the new home.
So what's the official guidance on how to screw that into a wall?
So what we've built in, and in fact, I'd invite your listeners to look us up online, and we can, or come and see us, and we can walk you through the way that works. There's a cavity, or there's a gap in the back for screwing through. So there's basically a hinge that sits or is attached to the back of that service void against the wall with your normal fixings into it, and then you can screw through directly through the back of the cabinet to attach it to the wall. So
you'd be using 100mm screws.
It's whatever fixture depending on what the wall is.
Right. So you need to go through the 62mm void and then into
the wall. It's a long screwdriver. So that it's actually we need a hole cover.
Okay.
For that hole at the back, but that's really just to put your drill bit through to attach it. So it's not an extra long screw for that.
And then a wall cabinet's the same, or they're
wall
different?
Cabinets don't have a void.
Right. There's no recess for wall cabinet.
No, there's not. No.
And I imagine you guys wouldn't have a corner wall cabinet in the library.
Yeah, there is. There's a 941 corner base and a 641 wall cabinet as well. Now, we've launched with that range, again, depending on what the feedback is. And that's been done in such a way to allow alignment between the base and the wall cabinets is how that range has been designed.
Right.
Again, we'll hear the feedback. So we've got a design also to allow different variations of blind corners as well. we think we've covered everything. We know that we haven't covered, that last 10% because we just don't know what it is yet. What we're really looking from our customers is lots and lots of feedback. Our whole model is built around being fast to iterate. We know you're not going to get 100% right on the first go. We haven't got the right colours potentially on range. We haven't got, every single different cabinet variation that solves every single different problem. So as we start to get that feedback, we'll prioritise what the biggest one is and then go build that into market. As an example, what we learnt through our test installs and as our first customers that have gone into market is that there was a problem with that service void that I've just been speaking about, that for when you use that as a sink cabinet, the gap that's required to have a pull-out sink is restricted by where that service void is. So we've gone and redesigned and are about to introduce into market or into our range a 3 different cabinets dedicated for sinks, which have basically the back wall directly to the back of the cabinet.
Right. So let's say I'm a cabinet maker. I get a client who comes to me who's doing a renovation. They say, I want a kitchen built, and for whatever reason, whether it's capacity constraints or because I love working with Haven, I say, okay, why don't we install a Haven kitchen for you? We then contact Haven and organize with the client a design consultation where a Haven designer comes out to the site, measures and goes through color selection, design, layout, all those things with the client. Haven then passes on that information from that meeting to us as the cabinet maker. We receive a quotation from Haven, which indicates the trade cost associated with that job, including any other associated fixtures, fittings, appliances.
Exactly.
Bench tops. And then we then submit a price to the client for that selection with whatever margin we're charging, whatever install cost, overheads that we factor in and margin that we add on.
Yep.
And then if they choose to accept the quotation, all payments and everything happens. So we contract to them directly. So the contractual relationship is between the client and us as the cabinet maker directly.
That's right. So what we kind of say, the reality is that we haven't had a lot that have gone this way because the trade actually are a lot more organised than say I am personally. That they're often thinking 5-6 weeks or longer ahead. But what in theory, if there's an urgent job come through, you could do that design consult in the morning, quote through, turn that around and be accepted this afternoon, pick up all of the parts and start installing that afternoon. So the speed of that turnaround is one of the key benefits that we can offer, and that will happen. It will be the exception rather than the rule, to be honest about it, but it's a nice feature to have. What we also offer for our trade customers is some expertise around the designer is really a service for the trade. And so as that design consult's going through, really what our guys have been trained on is really understanding what the requirements are and how to deliver a solution for that homeowner, but also to come back and give feedback to the trade around who else they've been speaking to, what kind of price points they're looking for in the market. And our job is to help the trades make more money. So if they're thinking this is a 15,000 job and our kind of learnings through that consult is it's only a $13,000 job in their mind, what we can help is find some ways of value engineering that out. Or if it's really a $17,000 or $18,000 job, how to price that to be able to get as much money out of it as possible without losing or still making sure we're helping that trade make as much money as possible without losing the job.
So it's contracting out the sales, design, administrative.
Yeah. So it's really, it's not looking to present ourselves as the answer to all of those. What we're looking to do is value add. So we'd give guidance, or here's what I've heard. Here's some things you might want to consider, almost as a coach or another piece of information to help the trade make informed decisions around where to price.
Right. So just going back to that journey, I was just going through just to understand the product. So that relationship is between the client and us directly as a cabinet maker.
It is, yeah.
And then whatever payment terms, whatever that's up to us to work out with the client.
It is.
Yeah.
What we hear often for the market is that the trade will charge the customer in in stages. What we offer is standard trading terms for the trade. So it's 30 days. Trading terms is our typical offer. Now, what we understand is that there's a payment up front typically for the trade. There's a payment on pickup of the goods, and there's a payment at conclusion of the job. So as a trade, what we can really help with is cash flow, that you're not paying us until you've received 100% of what your payment is from the homeowner, as well as
assuming a project life cycle of 45 days or less.
Yeah. Now the fact that it's ready to pick up, you're really not doing that until if it's taking you 45 days to install that job, then we'd love to find a way of helping you to make that faster.
I'd say something much meaner than that, but yeah, go on.
Yeah. So really our model, again, to make the trades life easier, a lot of our customers, as we see them, would be at the smaller end. So cash flow is really quite important. And we're definitely not targeting the large, national cabinet maker. We're looking for those customers that are hungry to grow their businesses, but really at the small end of the market is where we think our sweet spot is. And cash is something we can help with.
Right. So based on the market research you've done, what sort of profit margins are cabinet makers expecting versus what they're traditionally
tough one to answer because it varies so much by job, as you know. What we're hoping is if you're just doing an install, the rates that we understand in the market, and don't quote me on these, it's going to vary so much.
Of course.
But a typical just install part is $1,400-$1,500 for a typical kitchen, and then the cabinet maker would look to value add to that, and the fact that they've got to pay their factory and all of those things sitting behind it, so they might look to make $4,000 or $5,000 out of that job.
Out of say a $15,000 to $20,000.
Exactly.
Kitchen. In terms of that's a gross margin though.
Yes,
a gross margin. Yeah.
What we can offer is a similar level.
So gross margin including installation.
Including install.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And these are just rough numbers.
Yes, we're just toying with the. Yes.
What we can offer is a similar margin there or thereabouts, maybe $500 less. What we've saved is the requirement for all of the lost time at the beginning that we've spoken about. If you don't have your own factory and have to do the assembly of that, then we've saved you a day of assembling that kitchen as well. And the fact that you can do 2 of them in the week rather than just one. You could do those numbers, and pretty quickly what I'm hoping is that the trade will see this as a real opportunity to make more money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's the, like you said, the startup costs. I mean, a router and an edger and a 3-year lease is a lot of money.
It's a lot.
So
now we want those guys to do it. Don't get me wrong. If we can help somebody make so much money,
if the consumer is buying a $15,000 kitchen, my question to the industry is your product really going to be that much better than a standard size offering? And that's something that I genuinely want people to think about when they think about craftsmanship and artistry and all that. Like we're talking about, at the end of the day, we're talking about a $10,000, $15,000 kitchen. Is your offering for the consumer going to be better than a standard size offering?
There are things that the trade, like there's expertise. So I'm with you. I think it's the right question to be asking, by the way. But there is expertise that the trade bring, which is of huge value.
Which is why you guys aren't doing a vertically integrated service with installers and all that, because that's the variable. That's where you can't control for so much.
Yeah, and I think for us to go into the install part as well, we really are no longer about helping solve an industry problem. We actually become part of the problem.
Well, out of curiosity, would you be able to make a business case for a fully vertically integrated model? Would you be able to make a business case for it and scale it nationally?
If you kind of look at where the margins sit, there's money in owning the full end to end through to consumer. My feel, and we looked at it and dismissed it pretty quickly, to be honest, as we were building the business case.
Obviously, because there's a serious conflict there with your major business. But just out of curiosity, with all the research and all the research you've done about the market, and because if it makes sense, then you got to expect that someone else is looking into it as well.
Personally,
So it doesn't make sense.
If it was my money, is maybe the best way I can answer that. I wouldn't do it, and the reason for that is there are plenty of retail type brands out there in the market, and they spend a huge amount of money on showroom. They spend a huge amount of money on marketing. They spend a huge amount of money on their supply chain,
client service, and
all of those things. Either you spend it on the front end or the back end, or you spend it across both. Spending it across both, for me personally, is prohibitive. To be able to focus on building out the infrastructure to be able to make the product as well as all of that front end cost, and build a brand that's national that really makes sense is probably, it would be a hugely risky strategy.
Well, the back end's where you get predictable outcomes, whereas the front end is most of the unpredictable stuff in the process.
Yeah. Now there are those
which comes with higher margin, but that's naturally because of the risk profile and the non-scalability or
and there are consumers who love the value of the brand and will pay a premium for a certain brand. And if you look at some of the big players where the market share sits for the large brands in the retail offering, the Freedoms of the world, they produce a great product. They charge for it, and they're not sitting at that $35,000 premium end of the cabinet maker market. They sit above it. So there's value in there. There's money in there. But will they end up taking a huge chunk of the market? No, they'll still exist, but they'll own the share of the market that they own.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, from my understanding of Freedom, or even like a Caboodle, very cursory, limited understanding, their product isn't necessarily cheap. And from what I can tell, they operate a very high margin business, especially like a Freedom and whatnot. And I don't really think that they're providing, compared to the more like smaller players, I don't think that they're providing a better product. Yeah, but Haven I can see fitting in because it is a lower price point, it is more mass market. And the key thing is I think there's something there for the consumer. And the consumer drives it.
Yeah, we think there's room in the market for many players. And there's a space in the market for the Freedoms as well. There's customers who love it. But what we really hope is
really
there is. In fact, I had a customer the other day who went with a Freedom kitchen. We hadn't opened at that stage, by the way, but I was speaking to a friend of a friend who had just bought a Freedom kitchen, and their answer why they did that was because they really engaged with the designer, somebody who spoke to them, who really understood what their needs were, and those guys are very, very good at what they do. So what we're hoping is we can bring that level of service to the cabinet maker as well. We can take away the pain of the selection, which some of our customers hate. Having a wall of chips is a tough way to pick a kitchen.
Yeah,
and we're really hoping that we can take some of that pain away and offer that really great end-to-end painless experience for the homeowner that those Freedoms of the world offer. They project manage everything. They take a lot of pain away. It can be a great experience as a homeowner.
Sure.
But we hope that we can add enough of those elements to the smaller cabinet maker that they can go compete.
Yeah. I want to ask some selfish questions.
Go for it.
For myself, especially with your background. I think you may be able to provide some value. So I run a bespoke high-end architectural joinery company service, and we'll tie in things like metalworks, upholstery, stone, solid surface, all those things to create to solve really difficult problems, primarily for architects. What do you, and as you said, there is from the spectrum of custom to really high-end, much more high-end than what we do, that still represents the majority of the market. So what do you, if we just isolate that to the guys, say, doing high-end or really high-end, what do you see coming? What would there be any advice or any thoughts for us to what we should look out for, and whether it's labor resource challenges or whatever this, what do you see in store for us?
Wow, good. That is a good question. I think that end of the market is probably more insulated from some of the dynamics we've been talking about today than any other. and this is just personal view that I'm talking about here.
Of course.
When you get to, that $100,000 kitchen or the equivalent level of other custom joinery, whatever it is within a house or a commercial application, specialty and expertise is really what's going to win it. And the ability to offer something that takes the pain away from the architect, takes the pain away from the homeowner, that's something that is a lot harder to offer from a Mastige type offer that Wearhaven plays. So I think the dynamics of what will change over the next 10 or 20 years, I see less risk in those. Now, nothing's ever risk-free, but I see less risk at that end of the market because I can't see anywhere else. And you look globally, which I've spent a lot of time doing, that segment of the market remains fairly untouched globally. There has been no major disruption that I've seen anyway that's really hurt that end of the market. What I do see, though, is a couple of things. If you play the tape of what could happen over the next couple of years, is as other parts of the market change, then the smart businessmen, and there's plenty of them around, start to cast their eye to where there's value. And so the threat of new entries or migration to new segments of the market is a real possibility over the next 10 years. So that's I think establish a position and being able to defend against that is always going to have to be the case. Whether that change that we've been talking about in the middle of the market does play out or not, there's always going to be new entrants.
Right.
I think any business that really understands what their customers' problems are, that really understands where their pain points are and finds a way of bringing solutions to that is going to be successful.
Right. And where do you see the skilled labour market going for cabinet makers, or more broadly, I'm sure you've looked into that.
I have. I've been wrong on this for 20 years, one way or the other.
What, no more cabinet makers, CNCers only?
No, I spent a time working in an industry where, and I was in WA at the time when mining booms were on and zero unemployment was a real possibility. The example I gave back then, in actually a very similar forum to this one, was I think of the story of the guy in the savannah who's getting stalked by a cheetah, him and his mate. One of them stops, reaches down and starts tying up his running shoes. His mate goes, "What are you doing? It's a cheetah. You're not going to be able to outrun it." And he looks up at his mate and says, "I don't have to outrun it. I just have to outrun you." And the reason I talk to that is that the employer that really understands and looks after their team, the employer that is able to offer something different as far as flexibility. We go to money. I don't think it's always, well, we all know it's not always about money. It's about how good your boss is, how much fun it is to go to work, what my challenges are. That employer is the one who's going to win that race. But I think there is a real squeeze on market and skilled labour in Australia. That's happening now. So you don't have to go too far forward to see how that could or would play out. It's really the good employer who I think is going to win that.
I love that analogy, and how I would say it is, if you're not smart and if you're not smart with if you're not thoughtful and smart about how you go about things and just complain, then you deserve to die, because the cheetah's going to eat you.
Yeah, and there's really the world's caught up. The bad employer who mistreats their team, they've been burnt already. You know, people are smart enough to not do that anymore. But there are exceptions to that.
Yeah. I mean, my personal philosophy with HR is you have to really think about in a way that you're working for your guys. And it may be counterintuitive, but that's how you actually get the most out of them. That's how you get the most engaged, aligned, passionate people working for you.
Yeah, I think having an engaged team, having a team that really catches the vision of what you're trying to do and having clarity around that, having a team of smart people, it pays for itself in spades. I think having a problem shared as a business of we're facing this challenge, or I've got this customer who's trying to solve this problem, having the right people in the room to help solve that, who you can really rely on and trust, and who understand what you're about and what you stand for, you're going to win every time.
Yeah. Apart from, say, labor, what would you say for just to generally to business owners out there, what else would you ask them to keep an open mind toward, and what should they look out for? Just because, we started this conversation saying, look, you guys are here to help the trade and to help the industry, and you are uniquely aligned, and we haven't spoken about what's in it for Laminex.
Yep.
But you are uniquely aligned with cabinet makers succeeding, as you've stated, because no cabinet makers means less people buying board, which is the core part of the business, which will remain a core part of the business.
It is.
Perhaps.
Yeah, that's what Laminex is about.
And so in that vein, what other information would you pass on or things to think about for cabinet makers?
I could philosophize all day. I've got a couple that are probably top of mind for me. I think, and I hate the phrase, in fact, it turns my stomach a little bit, these unprecedented times. But we are in a never seen before world. And that plays out in things like capital. So the amount of money available into the market today has never been seen before. Cheap capital. So asset prices have gone crazy. The ability to get funding is probably at a point that is going to be difficult to see again in my lifetime. And the ability of the governments to spend the amount of capital into markets that they are at the moment and are likely to through COVID recovery is also unprecedented and will never happen again in my lifetime, would be my bet. So I'd suggest to watch the space carefully. I don't know how that's going to play, but the free money mindset that's really driven asset prices over the last 4 or 5 years and will for some time, but I wouldn't make large investments that put you at risk of that turning the wrong way, or at least make sure that you've got backstops in place. That is, say, interest rates start rising, or if you're reliant on a significant overdraft that the bank could start tightening up on, make sure that you've thought that through before you really get yourself exposed. So it's just good business management rather than alarmism around some threats for capital. But it's an area that will change. Is my call out there? Is my personal view. It's not really something that I've spent a lot of time talking to others about. So haven't really tested it, to be completely honest.
So just be very thoughtful about capital expenditure, how you're going to service those financial facilities that you're undertaking, and think about inflation relative to all that as well.
Yeah, I mentioned right at the beginning, I've got a finance background, so prudence probably lies in my heart, and it drives my wife crazy. It's the same as with anything, if you go to buy a house, if you go to make a large investment, or I'd just call out to make sure that I've got a high risk appetite personally. I think I do. But you can talk yourself into anything or out of anything. And I'd just say, take the time to do a logical process before you make a huge investment.
Yeah. So you said you got a high appetite for risk. Are you in the crypto stuff? And
I wish, desperately wish I was.
Have you heard of non-fungible tokens?
I have, yep. Yeah. I'd say my risk appetite is different to that.
Different to what us kids are doing.
Yeah. And I am a bit old. I remember the day where that guy bought that pizza for 40,000 Bitcoin or something like that.
That's a classic, isn't it?
It was that, and I've heard him interviewed actually recently and saying he'd do it the same again. But Jesus, that's an expensive pizza.
Sure.
My risk appetite is really around diligence. Do the data, but don't talk yourself out of it and action from it. So I'd like to convince myself of a dynamic, like we've been speaking about, the dynamic around what's happening within the market for Australia for cabinet making. But that's not a rash move. It's logically driven. It's based on global search. It's based on the data that we see that the cabinet maker, there's less cabinet makers in Australia today than there was 10 years ago. There's less next year than there will be this year. Actually, that might not be true because COVID's really going to lift the tide high, I think, for the next couple of years as far as the cabinet making market goes. it's a good time to be busy. But when the tide goes out, when the world starts to return to some form of semblance of normal, what I think the reality will be is that the deck chairs have shifted around, and so there is more imported. There's more. There's different players in the market than there were 3-4 years ago, and so I've convinced myself of that.
So in some ways, this is the ripe time for disruption for you guys.
It is. Well, maybe if I reframe that, there is disruption happening, and I'd rather be.
And it's a great entry point into that.
Yeah, I'd rather be having a friendly partner on my side helping with that disruption rather than I'm going to fight somebody else who's got different motives.
Right. Do you think we've pretty much covered everything that you would have wanted to talk about?
I've really enjoyed it, by the way.
Thank you.
I think we've covered a lot more than I expected to. So we've touched on some areas outside of just the standard what we're trying to do with Haven, and it's been great. Thank you.
I think I just want to summarize that for the tradesmen. I think because most of the audience who listen to this would be more in the trade. My thought around this is, you can't fuck with the market. Like the market is the market, and it's going to happen. And really, I'm a younger guy, so I want to be respectful about the way I say this, but don't overly romanticize the craft or the trade or whatever, because that's not going to pay the bills at the end of the day. You have to be really, in my opinion, sensible about, being open to where this market is going. And if the $15,000 kitchen market isn't going to work for you anymore, then maybe transition. Like you said, people will transition, or maybe realize that you can't beat them and join them. I think that's important.
I do think there's a transition. So if you do love your craft and love your trade and love spending your time on the tools, there's still plenty of time to do that. What I challenge your audience to do also is there another revenue stream you can bolt on in the meantime? Whether you believe or not what it is that I'm saying, I do think there is some immediate opportunities to make more money than you're making today.
Cool. And Laminex is still committed to making good board and doing all that.
Yeah, well,
hey, a lot of people don't like your website, and I don't want to hurt your feelings. I know you were part of that.
I was part of it,
part of the e-commerce.
Yeah,
but what's with the search function on the website?
It's a really good question. I could spend some time on it. We've actually
call out the developers.
Yeah,
who programmed that?
The short answer is we made some design decisions early in how that was put together, and what we've gone and done since then is hire actual expertise. So there's a head of digital within Laminex now, sits on the executive team. They're doing a lot of investment in that digital place, and our customers and the market will see some changes flow through in that in coming months and years. It's a place that we'll continue investing into. The search function itself, to answer your question, really was a choice around. It's essentially two systems bolted together, and we had some choices around how they could be bolted together. We made one that resulted in a difficult search choice.
Well, at least the phone lines are still good. And
in hindsight, would go back and fix that.
The customer service team is still good, so that's still an easy enough way of ordering.
Yeah, and what we've found is that, we've made some choices around withdrawing Whiteboard from that e-commerce platform because we had constraint. We, going into COVID, made the tough choices thinking that the market was about to turn down 25 to 30%. 32% was the number that we were thinking at the time.
Then it went up 64% or something.
We did the opposite. and we are reliant for that last. So we've turned all our factories on. They're all running 24/7. We've actually got no more growth capacity without starting to make the incremental improvements, which we continue to make. We've been previously able to import product from South Africa, from Europe or or New Zealand, which has been acting as our buffer. Those supply chains have really dried up because all of the demand for South Africa is being consumed in South Africa. All the demand for Europe is being consumed in Europe, and so on. So we don't have the buffers that we had previously. We've been lucky-ish through the most recent, it's probably a bittersweet response here, that demand has dropped probably over the last couple of months. It's allowed us to catch up, and we've removed constraint on whiteboard. So hopefully the market's in a slightly better spot than what it has been for the last 18 months.
Cool. And there's still going to be shortages for some time coming, right? From a macro standpoint.
Yeah, there will. And it's not just COVID either. But a lot of it is COVID. So global shipping lines are they're hurting, or they're not hurting. They're loving life, but they're charging. They've shifted their capacity towards shorter runs. So US to Europe, China to Europe as well. So all of the capacity of the market has really shifted to where the volume of population sits, and that's north. So that means that the Australian lines have got bigger ships, but less often, and really still less capacity than it normally would have. And that has made shipping rates skyrocket. We're now at spot rates for a lot of those things, which are enormous. We haven't seen that for a very long time. And it just means that when you're sourcing something out of Europe, for example, which a lot of our customers do, then you kind of last in the chain, because not only are you paying higher shipping rates to get it here, or it's embedded within the prices, but you're also competing with demand, which is just around the corner, that can turn around really quickly.
Yeah, that's great insight, and I really I kind of I do get a genuine sense from you guys that you are I hesitate to say trying to, and I mean this with respect. I hesitate to say trying to really, or helping the cabinet maker as being a core part of the mission. But I do see alignment there from an economic. Like, I see the economic incentives there as to why there would be that alignment. So I certainly appreciate that, and all the advice that you've given on just those things to think about capital expenditure and whatnot, and just being careful about growing your business during this time. I really appreciate that. And also, of course, the insight into Haven Kitchens.
My pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. I personally, I'm very interested in seeing how the kitchen, sort of how the industry is going to play out. It's an industry that I'm personally quite new to, but yeah, I think I agree with you. It is ripe for disruption.
Yep.
I do honestly think most of that market that you guys are going to be operating in could operate a lot more efficiently if some parts were more centralized. So yeah, I'm excited to see where this is all going to go.
Me too. What I'd really encourage your listeners to do is to, particularly if you're Melbourne based, or if even if you're not, feel free to pick up the phone or come and see one of our trade centres when we're open to do that, because you'll see the reality. Look, all of our sites are 1,000 square metres plus, stock on the shelves. You'd be able to see the reality of what it is I'm talking about. You'd see how we treat your customer, the homeowner. You'd be able to see some prices as an example. So kind of get a good sense about where we're pitching ourselves in the market and how you'd be able to make money. It's come and test it.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to come through, have a look, because I'm very interested.
Great.
Very curious.
Well, we're in Dandenong, Oakley, Windsor. We're about to open one in Thornbury as well. So we cover a fair bit of southeast Melbourne. It's a tight model that we're launching. Really, again, to that saving time, making the trades life easier, that you're not travelling 20, 30, 40 minutes each way, potentially a couple of times. We're in a test, so we'll refine this model over the next year or so, add to our range, adjust it, make sure we hear the feedback that we're getting, and then depending on how that goes, we'll look to expand.
Awesome. Thank you, and continued success.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.